Everybody, it's 6:30, so we'll make a start. Thank you very much. Welcome to Executive Board. Welcome to our Chief Exec online. He's on leave, but he's joining us online. First item on the agenda is the evacuation procedure. On hearing the evacuate signal, please carry out the following: exit the building by your nearest safest exit. All visitors report to assembly point G. All staff report to their designated assembly point on Woolpack Way car park. Do not leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or fire brigade officer. Item number 2 is that apologies from Councillor Aidan Phillips and substitute is Councillor Aidan Phillips. Item number 3, disposable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. There are none, thank you. Item number 4, public participation. We don't seem to have any members of the public here, nor have we received any questions, I don't believe. So item number 5, the minutes of the Executive Board held on the 21st of November 2022.
Would that be accepted?
By Councillor Simpson and seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favour? Thank you. Item number 6, minutes of the Senior Management Recruitment Subcommittee held on the 21st of November 2022. Have been circulated. I'll propose from the chair there, true, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous again, thank you. Item number 7, key corporate issues. Excuse me. Board sets out main issues facing the council at the current time, both externally and internally. Members are asked to identify any other key issues. This will be used to form the corporate plan of the new council 23 to 27. Any comment, Councillor Gosling?
We came to a training session with our business team before planning, not last month, the month before, and he cited as part of his presentation that the key barrier that he had to his role at the moment was Brexit and the impacts of Brexit, and claimed that that would be bigger than the pandemic. And yet we've got no reference at all to that in our corporate plan. I wondered how we are coping with the challenges that that's faced, or the opportunities that that's faced, if it's not even there. So I think that is a key issue that we probably need to understand a little bit more about. And just kind of about the presentation, because it's obviously a really meaty document with loads and loads of work in it. I know last time we had some links which were really easy to find data on. We seem to have had some adaptations and the links don't seem to be there, or they just seem to go to a document rather than the actual key information. I don't know if it's possible to kind of simplify it. And also if it is being adapted over time. So is there any way we could highlight the adaptation so that we can track the changes and make sure that it's clear to everybody what's added and what's gone? And there was still, I asked last time about the first person nature, and we talked about it not being a dictatorship. And there's still some sections which are very definitely in the first person, which for a corporate plan that's supposed to be from the council isn't necessarily the best format to use.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gosling. As the first part of your question on Brexit, I'm not aware of really any major issues the council faces because of Brexit.
It was certainly something that our own business officers brought up as the major challenge in his role. So I have to say it came as a surprise, I think, to me and the rest of the board at the time, because we haven't had any other information about it. And might be worth exploring more.
Okay, well, we can certainly look. I don't know whether Steve, do you want to comment any further?
I mean, I haven't specified Brexit, although clearly there are a number of macroeconomic issues that are sort of summarised as such. So any effects, as I say, from an economic point of view, whether they're caused by one thing or another, are contained in there. I haven't sort of split those out. I'll perhaps catch up with Councillor Gosling as to which officer it was at Planning Board. I think it was an external officer rather than one of ours. And in terms of the links, again, I'll pick up with which ones aren't working. In terms of track changes, as it's a sort of original document, albeit it is built on previous ones, I mean, it would have to be a sort of compare and contrast with last year's report. I think it would be sort of visually a little bit difficult if it was presented to the board in track changes, but I can see if I can do a track changes version on the side, as it were, for Council Gosling next year, if that helps.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chairman. It's certainly a very interesting report. I think there's a lot in here that is, almost required reading for all members to go through. And I think that there is, I'd be interested to see how can we ensure that members of the authority have a greater level of understanding of these issues and what can be done. I'm also curious as to the nature of what I guess is the third appendix on the 2021 census, because I'm wary of taking this out of context, because I think that there are some of these charts that mean something but don't mean anything in the context of the report. And the one I'm particularly confused about is the top left on page 60 of 268, which is talking about proficiency in English. And I'm sure that's just wrong. I cannot believe that if I'm reading it properly, that only 1% of the borough says they can speak English very well. So I think that is clearly a subset of a different question, and missing what the different question is.
I agree.
Can I comment on that? Actually, the category above, which is 98%, says the main language is English, and then underneath it's the people that English isn't their main language. 1% can speak very well.
So where does it say that?
It's not clear. I agree.
Yeah.
But actually, the first bar above "Can I speak English very well?" is main language is English. So I think the assumption is that if your main language is English, you can speak it well. Not always true.
I like to think I can speak English very well, but I wouldn't have made that assumption.
But I think the can speak English well is actually for second language or additional languages. It was my interpretation, but I agree. It was a bit confused.
Yeah, because then it adds up, doesn't it, to 100%? Yeah. So we assume all those people that English is their main language can speak English very well.
Well, in that case, Chairman, I think I ought to move myself from the first category into the cannot speak English well, or certainly cannot understand the tables of English very well.
That's broad, Geordie.
But I think, my general premise is there's a lot of stuff in it which is really quite interesting and quite useful. And I just wonder if some form of presentation to the council before a full council meeting on what is in here in terms of the key corporate issues might be useful.
Okay.
Certainly to those of us who don't speak English, though.
I'm sure we can arrange that. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much. Just under 8.3 on planning. I mean, it's a really comprehensive report, but I do think we ought to recognise that we've got to review our policy, strategy, whatever you call them, on gypsies and travellers in our area, not to mention how many sites we need, etc. It's a fairly important issue, I think, both in terms of, you might say, residential sites and also our handling of unauthorised plans. And I think it's something that should be just reflected in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Steve, you've got your hand up. Did you?
Yes, it was just, firstly, apologies that bit of the census information wasn't as clear as it could be. I was just pleased that it added up to 100%, and so therefore I was concentrating on the maths rather than English. So apologies, it isn't clear, and I'll just check, but I think that is the assumption. In terms of the presentation to full council, I think as we move forward to a refreshed corporate plan, I think that would be very useful. So perhaps not for next week, given I'm on leave all this week, but for next week, not. But as we go towards adopting the next council's corporate plan, I think that would be a really good idea. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor, excuse me, Simpson.
Just for the avoidance of any doubt, I generally wasn't suggesting next week.
Okay, so I'll move that from the chair then, seconded by Councillor Hayfield. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Item number 8 is the capital strategy. So we review our capital strategy annually and update it as necessary. Clearly, resources remain limited, so the overall approach is unchanged this year. Councillor Gosling.
I'm sure you won't be surprised to find out that we're being abstaining.
I have a suspicion. Thank you, Councillor Gosling. Yes. Okay. So unless there's any other comments, queries, I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Simmons. All those in favour? Abstentions? And that's carried. Item number 9, the proposed 3-year capital programme. Are we? Has anybody got any comments or questions that before has been circulated, etc.? Okay, I'll move that from the chair then, seconded by Councillor Simmons. All those in favour? And 4 abstentions. Thank you. And item number 10 is the general fund revenue estimates 2023-24. I mean, again, the report has been circulated. Anybody got any comments, queries, questions? Okay, I'll move that to the chair then, seconded by Councillor Simmons. All those in favour? Any abstentions? That's carried, thank you. Excuse me. Item number 12 is the Leisure Facilities Local Authority Trading Company. Report of the management team and the Director of Leisure and Community Development. Item 11.
General fund estimates.
Sorry, the General Fund Revenue Estimates 23-24 and setting of the council tax. I'll move it from the chair. Sorry.
Chair, if I may, the Planning and Development Board
Yes.
spotted that some income hadn't been included within the estimates that they were considering last week. So could I just ask you to add that you approve these recommendations with the addition of the correction of income for Planning and Development Board?
Thank you. Councillor.
Sounds very grateful for that, Chairman. It makes us look less profligate than we were earlier.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, amendment, I'll move that from the chair. Seconded by Councillor Simmons. All those in favour? Abstentions? Carried. So now we're on item. It's the Leisure Facilities Local Authority Trading Company. And so this report follows the workshop that was held in January. Well, all councillors were invited in, and it's quite, I'm pleased to say, quite actually attended, which was good. It was a good meeting. So that now the report presents for consideration the legal arrangements and contractual documentation that will govern the relationship between the Borough Council and the LATCO. The name of which is proposed to be North Warwickshire Leisure Limited. Any comments or questions?
I think the meeting was very useful. I think we got a lot of information. I think that some of our concerns were actually reinforced with the meeting. I think we have had confusion over decisions at several key points. And I think that it seems like every question we ask just opens the door to more questions. So we've kind of gone through, there was the VAT question, we didn't know whether the council was going to keep the VAT or whether it's going to impact on the councils, which we now have some clarity on. But then there was the directors' issues. We've had issues about whether or not it's going to be tax exempt, which I think yourself and the experts actually disagreed. And we still don't seem to be in a point, we don't know what the fee is. We don't have a clear timeline. We seem to be plagued with kind of doubts and uncertainties. We don't know what the settlement fees are going to be. We don't quite understand, and although there is obviously a wealth of detail in this, we still don't seem to have that clear timeline and understanding. And I think it still presents quite a heavy risk to our leisure services. And finally, I think I'd like to, we used the word waffle, unfortunately, last meeting. But just talk about co-ops and community-led, community-owned businesses. Because at the moment, I think we've got 7,000 independent co-ops. They employ about 250,000 people who aren't unpaid. I'm assured that John Lewis and the National Building Society and First Mate, Greenwich Leisure, which is the biggest leisure co-op at the moment, pay extremely good wages, actually. And we're not talking, as it was referred to at the time, about a flaky volunteer-led service. This is one of the biggest growing sectors, certainly in public business, as opposed to private. But 14 million organisations contribute about 40 billion to the UK economy at the moment, and has actually proven to be more resilient in tough times. So certainly over COVID, it was one of the very few areas which actually made a growth of 1 million. Despite the setbacks of COVID. At the moment, there's 550 sports and recreations co-ops in the UK who are doing really well and actually have a turnover of about 750,000, including Greenwich Leisure, which started in 1993 and now boasts of 250 successful leisure centres, 100 libraries, 10 children's centres, even they've diversified into other areas. And making huge roads, and not only that, but they come with the contributions to their communities, they come with supporting their communities. I think GLL at the moment are running sports foundations, prizes, funding, academic funding for people that want to get into the industries, as well as all the other social benefits of publicly owned companies or cooperatives. And I just think it's something that we haven't considered at all. I haven't seen one line in this entire list of reports considering other options, and I just think that we haven't explored options. We spent a massive amount of time and effort and money and officer time into one singular option, and I just think we needed to be broader and more informed.
Okay, Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. I think it'd be helpful, given that we've had this paper tabled today from Unison, and now I've tried to cross-check against the lengthy, detailed document under, let me just find the title, under Trowers and Hamlin's Leisure Services Agreement, to just pause and see whether or not any of the concerns that are signalled in this letter have to any extent been addressed in paragraphs or sections 21 and 22 and 23 of that Tower and Hamlin's service agreement, because it would appear just on the surface that none of the things that they are asking for are indeed reflected. Most of the descriptions are about terminations and TUPE rather than the commencement of new staff and the terms under which they might be appointed, such that there isn't a sense of a two-tier unequal workforce developing once this company gets going. That's my first question, is can we just understand, if Simon can comment, where the response to this is going to be? We have been asked to consider it. And the second thing is in terms of this time frame. There is an election obviously coming up in May, and it would be helpful to know the pace at which this is going to be taken forward, and whether the incoming administration, be it the same colour or not, is going to inherit a ready-made, done and finished product that's already rolling with appointments being made and TUPE underway, or whether the pace of implementation is actually being done with that potential change in mind. Politically, I mean.
Okay, I'll start with your, well, there were both your questions on the timescale, and the timescale was set out some 12 months ago, and we clearly stated in that timescale that this is what we were going to achieve, and we wanted the LATCO up and running by the beginning of the new municipal year, and you know that's what we're still working on.
And that's the track we're still adhering to. I mean, that is the track we're on, is it, with this?
Yeah.
Okay. It just seems to be quite a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
On Councillor Gosling's point about options, you clearly don't recall, you know, way back when we started on this journey, we asked for several options to be looked at, and it was the consultants that said the best option in their opinion would be to go for a local authority trading company, which we then agreed with after looking at their reports, and it's been, you know, through full council, it's been through resources board, it's been through C&E board, so you know the options were there right from the outset, and we as the administration took consultants' advice and went with the LATCO, which is one they said was the best fit for us. Yes, you can always look at other types of organisation, Councillor Gosling, you know, whether it's local authorities, business, or and say, you know, one's doing well and another one's, you know, to be perfectly frank, you know, it's irrelevant. You know, we've got to look at what is best for North Warwickshire and our residents, and that was the advice that we saw, and that's the advice we then took. So that was that. There's been reports. I mean, I don't understand your point about this confusion over directors. Doesn't seem, well, we as an administration aren't confused over the directors. I don't think the staff are confused over directors and who those directors are going to be.
Sorry, just on that, it names Richard Dobbs as an independent director. Is that still the case?
Well, yeah,
that's fine. I was going to query that before.
Okay. As far as non-domestic rates, yes, I don't know where the question has come from about the confusion whether we are going to be exempt from or the LATCO would be exempt from non-domestic rates, because I'm not aware of anybody's raising that question, and it's clear that we will be. On VAT, yeah, that is a very complicated subject, but there will definitely be some VAT savings. On tax exemption, that organisation, as and when it starts making a profit, will be exempt from tax. That's the trouble. I know there was a disagreement that I'm an accountant and he's a lawyer, and I am right and he is wrong. So, as I say, I mean, I've said many times before, Councillor, I don't know where your confusion comes from, because that was your opportunity. I thought it was a good meeting. I thought it was a constructive meeting, presentation. I thought the consultants answered the questions. I don't personally understand why you're still quite so confused, as you say, because you asked many questions, they were answered. So we are where we are. And as pardon?
Sorry.
And as far as the letter that we've received tonight, yeah, that we looked at in due process, absolutely. I can't answer the questions now because I only had it 2 minutes before the meeting started. So yeah, we will look at it and address any concerns as and when. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Joe. It's just a minor technical point. Well, I was looking through the draft agreement. I saw a couple of occasions where terms which I think I've taken as being defined terms are not defined. And there are certain bits of information which are still missing, such as company number, for example, and the definition of affiliate. I know recommendation A is that the chief executive should finalise the contact of the documentation with the head of legal services and our external advisors. Can I just be assured that they're going to have a final legal trawl through the document? Because certainly it seems to me there are still some elements of draft in it, which might be awkward for the LATCO when it's up and running if those defined terms are not correct.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a fair comment, Councillor Simpson. I mean, and I think, it goes without saying, one of the key aspirations of, if you like, of this administration is not just to form a LATCO and let them take over our leisure services. Just to say, we are working very, very hard with our leisure services team that will obviously then become the LATCO, to ensure that they are a success. Myself and Councillor Bell, for instance, met with our leisure team only last week to keep going on that track. We have, as I said before, we've got a real commitment, not just to the council to save money, but also to our staff and our residents, and we want everybody to succeed. And it would be, well, to be honest, it would be absolutely outrageous if we just transferred our leisure services into a LATCO just to let it fail. That's just not an option for us. So we are working tirelessly, I think it's fair to say, to ensure that the LATCO, when it takes over, will be a success, and therefore we will achieve our aims of, dare I say, keeping most of the people happy most of the time, because we will be, saving the authority some money. We will be making our leisure services more efficient and also more, hopefully turning that into a profit. But keeping our staff happy, but equally providing the services to our residents. So, Councillor Chambers.
Yes, can I ask another question, looking at the presentation, PowerPoint one, and the appointments of, for example, Richard Dobbs as an independent director. Is this the Chief Executive, Interim Corporate Director, Streetscape, and independent director? Are they the only board directors which are going to be appointed, and where do members fit in the board governance arrangements of this company, if they fit at all?
Yeah, there will be members, member directors as well. There needs to be clearly a mechanism there for members to be able to scrutinise the board. So it's that's one of the details we're ironing out, because you're going to have member directors, but you'll also need, on the council side, you'll need members to be able to scrutinise the LATCO, and that's it's one of the things that we are still teasing out, to be honest. But it's got to be, as was said at the presentation, you need to be able to give the LATCO enough latitude to be able to make decisions without having to come to the council, for every minutiae detail before it makes a decision. But equally, you need a mechanism whereby the council, because it's owned by the council, will have that ultimate say, and that still needs to be tweaked. I think it's fair to say.
I'm sorry to keep coming back. I'm looking at this structure diagram where I think somebody said, I can't remember whether it was formally at the C&E board, that there was beginning to be a view that this was rather a cumbersome set of layers through which accountability, monitoring, and the relationship between SLATCO and the local authority is going to be handled, because there's there's potentially two more layers under the C&E board that we would be responsible for handling, and then there'd be the board of directors within the LATCO. And I'm just, I mean, is this another thing that's just got to be worked on, and for which delegated authority is going to the chief executive to do, or are we signing this structure off as the one that will be the start-up point for future governance by the council of its LATCO? It just seems a little bit premature to have appointed somebody already to the independent board of directors when the company hasn't yet been formed and there's no chair of the board of directors appointed. Yet an appointment has already been pushed into the board of directors without much thought or discussion, presumably by those that are going to shape and steer the company and its governance. And nor has there been any of the other structures that are here, the shareholder committee, the council representatives, etc., also had the option of looking at how you want to recruit people to the board of directors, community, links, etc. So it just seems that somebody's decided that's a good idea, and here you are. Executive board approve that.
Okay, so let's bring Chief Exec in. You might be able to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think just on that last point, in terms of there's no intention to push anything in. This is the purpose of this report, is to recommend to the board who the board of directors would be. So in answer to your question, that those would be the board of directors. And on page 140 of the papers, you can see that line there, which is, so anything underneath that is the company. And so the member role, there will be a member role in terms of the shareholder role. So there aren't 3 layers below Community Environment Board. And in fact, actually, we're recommending to get rid of one of those layers, the shareholder committee, because it came, and that's a recommendation, not being pushed through. That's the purpose of this report, because it became clear to us as part of the discussion at that meeting that actually that would probably just duplicate the oversight role of the Community Environment Board. So on that diagram, we'd be looking at the Community Environment Board, and they would play the shareholder role, the oversight role. And then the council's representative would be Simon, so he could then give effect to that decision, because we can't delegate to individual members. And then, as we've discussed before, the idea is that that's where members sit, and then the officer will run the company as before, but obviously the shareholder role and the oversight role will sit with members of the Community Environment Board. So this is one of the purposes of this report, in terms of recommending those structures.
Yeah, just very briefly to build on that, that is referred to in the main body of the report under articles of association and the role of the C&E board. And the other thing for which there is provision, that those board of directors that are identified in the recommendations, that's initially the council, if it felt the need to, could appoint additional directors at an appropriate point in time to that board if it felt the need to do so.
So just to be clear then, Chair, the involvement of members, elected members in this LATCO and its oversight is now going to be based entirely within the C&E board. And that's where the accountability, the governance of these agreements and decisions about what we're responsible for investing, like the boiler on the swimming pool and those things, will all be handled now at the C&E board. Is that correct? By members anyway? Where it requires a local authority decision rather than a board of directors decision at the LATCO level?
No, because the C&E board haven't got that delegated authority, have they? So it will still be full council.
In where
Clear as mud.
is now.
Yeah, no idea.
Well, it's exactly the same now, isn't it? You know, the boards haven't got a delegated authority to make decisions on very, very much at all. So full council have in exactly the same way. Again, you know, you shake your head, Councillor Gosling, and you say it's all very unclear and all the rest, but you know, this is how the council works, is it not? You know, boards make decisions and then recommend to full council, and it will be exactly the same way. You know, this is how this local authority works. So no board has executive powers to do anything really, because full council has those executive powers. So that's what it will be. So the C&E board will be a representative of shareholders of the council, because it's shareholders that own companies and directors that run them. And I think that's, you know, something so a little bit confusing for you, but it's the shareholder. We are shareholders. You know, the council will be the shareholders. So we as members, we will be the shareholders. So we will own the company, and the directors will run the company on our behalf. And the C&E board will be a representative of the shareholders to scrutinise, but ultimately the decisions will still be with full council as they are now.
So, Chair, can members attend the board meetings of this LATCO to observe the operational side? Are these meetings going to be in public? The LATCO directors, of which there are 3 now appointed.
Well, I wouldn't have thought so, because board meetings of companies are not normally attended by shareholders, are they? Only, you know, AGMs, for instance, or EGMs, because and that's the whole point. You know, a board is there to carry out the instructions of the shareholders. So there will, you know, all that would do if shareholders started to attend, and this would be not just for the LATCO, but any company, if shareholders started attending board meetings, then that just, you know, nothing would get done, because, you know, shareholders would start raising questions, etc., etc. So I mean, you know, so you're just stifling with bureaucracy, or trying to stifle things with bureaucracy. You need to get things going. So you need to have trust and faith in your board of directors to get on with its business, which is what I referred to earlier. We don't want to stifle the LATCO. We want it to succeed. We don't want to weigh it down with bureaucracy. We don't want to have a mechanism in place whereby they have to come to the shareholders for every little decision. You've got to give them the autonomy and the flexibility to work and carry out the instructions. So the basic principle will be to make a success. That's what the shareholders will be telling the LATCO. The board of directors will carry out those instructions and then report back regularly for scrutiny to see if they're achieving the aims that the shareholders want. Any other questions? Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chair. For me, the key to this is it's taken an awful long time to get here, for I'm sure good reasons. The guiding principles for me is what are we trying to achieve? And they are still the aims that I think are absolutely laudable and worthy of our support. I hear the questions. I think questions are always reasonable in terms of, are we doing the right thing for the right reasons? And despite having heard a lot of questions, I still think we're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And in terms of its governance, you know, quite often local government is pretty opaque in the way it runs things. Private companies are governed by a whole schedule of legislation, which is different. And in a lot of ways, I think there's an awful lot more in here that is clearer and sets out how this business will operate, what it will do, that is not the case with a local government board. So in ways, you know, I would say to those who are questioning, what is this and how is it? Very reasonable to ask those questions. But you need to compare how that works in practice today to how this will work in practice tomorrow. And I think there's an awful lot more clarity than the perceived method of how it works at the moment. So I get why people may be wary of it, but actually the practice is, I think this will become clearer with rather greater clarity on aims and objectives and delivery than where we are at the minute. So, Chairman, I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Proposed by Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? Any against? And that's 4, and that's carried. Thank you.
Chairman, I should just add, so I should have made the point to begin with. I propose that recommendation in the light of having read the consultation response from Unison, and in the expectation that, as you said earlier, when you've had an opportunity to consider the comments in more detail on the 5 before, that they will be responded to appropriately.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Okay. Item number 13 is the constitutional and delegation matters. So we had a discussion about the deputy leader, etc. So this is sets out the removal of the deputy leaders from chair of boards and then having a deputy leader who actually a deputy leader. And then the other recommendation is to establish a member panel to take decisions on the UK debt prosperity funding decisions. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of those deputy leaders who's not a deputy leader, I'm generally quite happy with sections 1 to 3.4 of the report. I'm very happy to move that part of the recommendation. I am less content, I have to say, with section 3.4, because I don't think that the administration and governance of the LEADER project was an exemplar of effective delivery. So I generally ask that we have a bit more information as to how that will work and what we intend to do and what will happen. So I, if you will, Chair, from my own personal perspective, happy to move the first part and defer 3.4 for further consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Any other comments or queries?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. So just to be clear, we're happy.
66. 266.
Okay. Yeah, so we will recommend to the to full council's delegation and change the constitution, but we'll look at the arrangements for UK shared prosperity funding.
Chairman, can I ask a question? Sorry to come in. Just in terms of the UK shared prosperity fund, just conscious that we do need to get moving, given that the year 1 is the one that is the financial year we're currently in and coming to an end. Is there any more detail that I can assist with at this stage? It's essentially just suggesting a 3-member panel to approve the bids that come in, or not, as the case may be, to decide on where the money is spent.
Yeah, excuse me. The concern is that, well, the way I read it was that there will be a panel of officers similar to the leader that will recommend then to a panel of members, but I think the panel of members need to see everything, basically.
Yes, I mean, Simon might be able to advise further, but yes, I mean, the 3-member panel can have whatever they want. There'll be nothing that officers see and members won't. I can certainly give that assurance if that's the concern.
So the panel of the panel of members, if the panel of members see all the applications, then I don't anybody will have any issue. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more fundamental than that, although we may be constrained by what we put in our bid. But is handing out money to other groups the best way to do it? Because, you know, getting the impact we want from that is not always achievable. And should we not be taking a greater lead in what we want to use this money for? And then, of course, invite community groups, etc., to participate with us on a bidding basis if that's what you need, to an end that we all agree, to an objective. What do we want to happen as a result of spending the best part of £2 million? I'm not clear about it at all.
Chairman, if I may, the answer to that question is yes. The procurement models within UKS are very wide, so you can do it yourself, you can directly commission these things, or you can have an open procurement and say there's a pot of money to provide whatever it is that you want to do. So within the sort of broad categories that the government have set, which are community in place, people and skills, and business support, within those broad categories, there is a very broad number of outcomes that the council can choose to look at. So as I say, you can the council could do it itself. The council could ask another party directly to do it, or there could be an open procurement exercise for people to come in and put a bid in for it, if that assists.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question? So when we bid for this money, did we say what we expected the impact to be at the end of whatever the timescale is?
If I may, Chair, that there are a number of outcomes set out in the programme, and so we're constrained only in that respect, in terms of there are a number of outcomes and topic areas that they wish to do. But how you do that within those outcome areas is as far as we know, because government is suggesting this will be light touch within the authority of the council.
I'd like to support Councillor Bell's, comment really that there are different ways of doing it, and I'm sure we've all had an experience of throwing it out, people coming with their begging bowls, and those that have got the most experience and skills and capacity in their communities and parish councils to write the applications will be the ones that inevitably put the best case forward and get picked for funding. It doesn't necessarily reflect the borough council's priorities in terms of what it wants and thinks it needs for the borough, and doesn't necessarily deliver a very efficient or joined up approach, maybe across different areas, to fixing particular things. I'm not sure whether Councillor Simpson's comment about LEADER was about the sheer bureaucracy of the EU funding process, which actually was handled reasonably well and competently by the officers we had at the time, but it was just the governance of that was almost impossible in terms of the complexity that was expected from the EU LEADER programme. So I think there are two quite different points here, and I certainly would favour a more strategic framework for doing this that is led by the borough council, so that it becomes more of a commissioning, of the 1.9 million, which at the best, in terms of sizable projects with impact, is probably no more than about 10 or 12 meaty projects that really could fix some of the things that we want to see done as a borough, and hopefully we're done with the better understanding of plans and the economic development and the town's needs that we have an understanding of. So I don't know whether we got time to start to do that, but I haven't seen the nature of the bid that went in, or the application, so maybe there are some clues there that could be turned into some sort of commissioning framework against which this panel can then judge and encourage applications to come in along a set of lines. I'm not trying to squash the bottom-up approach, but I just think 1,000 flowers blooming with 1,000 applications is not the way to handle £1.9 million of additional funding.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Bell and Councillor Simpson now. bring Steve.
I was just going to say, in terms of moving this forward and understanding from the chief executive that we're a little time constrained as soon as we're in February and we've got to do it by the end of March, that this small group that's suggested here is about shaping the project and how it's going to work and how we're going to distribute or use the money ourselves. That I'm comfortable with. But there's not an assumption, in my view anyway, that this group is about looking at bids, because we haven't got to that stage yet. So if this small group is about this is what we're going to do and how we're going to handle it, I'm happy. But not to assume that they're just there to look at bids that come in.
So, Councillor Simpson.
Well, thank you, John. My instant reaction to what the chief executive was simply say, no, there isn't at this point, because I just don't understand how it will work effectively. Now, you know, I mean, I can only go by what it says in the report. The investment plan suggested draft governance similar to the arrangements for the LEADER project. Part of this includes a decision-making panel of members. Isn't that the opposite of what you just said, Councillor? It's a decision-making group. Therefore, it must be. Look, I mean, yeah, Chairman, I don't want to hold this up if there's a time frame. And the recommendation is that this is simply a recommendation to council. So it's not beyond the wit of the administration of this authority to find a method of advising members between now and the full council. And if that is what's going to happen, then I'm happy for it to go to full council with a proviso. If I still don't know at full council, then I'll repropose my motion that we actually get more information on it and understand what on earth it is. How will this work and what is it? Because the more this discussion's gone on, the more opaqueness seems to me to have been created and the less clarity. And so it seems to me at the minute we're saying everything is everything, but it'll be signed by 3 councillors. Sorry, I'm just not convinced. So happy to wait to full council, because if this is simply a recommendation to council, I mean, frankly, really doesn't matter whether we agree or we don't tonight, because full council will make the decision. But generally, I'm not feeling. I mean, I don't know why we're going to a 3-member panel. Is that a subcommittee of this board, which will then receive minutes on what it decided? Will that panel make final decisions? In which case, that must be the only reason why it's a constitutional change. And what are our opportunities for engagement as members? So, I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to agree. There were things of LEADER which were really positive, and things which were really not positive. And all these organisations that I've seen that's involved in making decisions on public money, where it's going down to grassroots, have been inefficient and have not always led to entirely the desired outcomes and led to the best possible use of that central government money. And I'm really anxious that we get the best out of that. It was only 2 million quid, but it's still 2 million quid we wouldn't have had otherwise. So, I generally, I'm more inclined to vote against it tonight now than I was to begin with, and I was pretty well inclined to vote against it before, but I'm happy to be advised between now and full council.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. So, I think it's fair to say, we'll seek the clarification for full council, but the panel, and we can talk about the numbers and again seek clarity at full council, but the panel is there to decide the policy, if you like, rather than decision ultimately.
It's still coming back to the full council, though.
Yeah, it's coming back to full council.
It's still coming back regardless.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chief Exec.
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, it's similar but not identical to LEADER, if that gives some assurance. The reference to LEADER was around the sort of advice from officers and anybody else who can provide assistance to that body. There needs to be a body that can make decisions on this, that can meet more often than boards do. Whether it's 3 or 5 or however many you want, you can have as many as you want on that. And I think the only other point, just to reiterate, given the comments that have come in about that, you can spend this how you want on what you want, but the outcomes are set in the programme. So it very much is not just receiving a short list of bids. It's around how do you want to achieve those outcomes against the indicative investment plan that's been submitted, which can be varied.
Okay. So,
Chairman, I wish I'd never asked. And no doubt the chief executive wished that he'd stayed on holiday.
okay. Well, we'll see the clarification for full council next week. But subject to that clarification, I'll move what it says from the chair, seconded by Councillor Jens. Thank you. All those in favour? And against?
Abstain.
Yes.
Shall we book clarity?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's carried. Okay.
Move agenda item 14, Chairman.
It's actually their provision.
Well, thank you.